Hello viewers, I'm SB, and welcome back to something a little bit different. So I'm going to be sort of laying out my thoughts about Darkest Dungeon in general, the expansion in particular here. I just kind of want to have a little bit of a conversation with you guys about it. I want to hear your thoughts about the game, and also your thoughts about my campaign and about my thoughts as well. And I want to say before we get into this that I am doing this pretty largely because of a request somebody made on the subreddit. So if you would like to have your voice heard about the channel and its content in general, please do go over there and respond in that post. I'd be very interested to hear what people have to say, because to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of shooting in the dark most of the time as regards to putting out content you guys like. So yeah, if you have opinions, feel free to please go to the subreddit and express them. Should be a link in the description below. So, this Darkest Dungeon campaign, I've been trying to put my thoughts about the Crimson Court into a little bit more of a crystallized form. I have complicated feelings. I think if you have to put a single word to it, I think the word I would use is bad. I almost said not good. The single word I would use is it's not that good. I think that from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, the actual end of the game, like when we defeated the Darkest Dungeon, the stuff that we experienced from the Crimson Court expansion was pretty positive. The tension of our guys, our whole cast slowly vampirizing as we're running out of blood, and then like that slog through the first Baron's courtyard mission. I actually think the tension that added was really valuable. So if I thought it was good, why am I saying that it's not good? Is because I think that's all of it. I think that's all of the stuff in it that's fun. I think the red tier courtyard dungeons are absolutely miserable. I was very, very surprised to see that they were both like 100-room labyrinths, because I was expecting a little bit more differentiation. I thought my expectations had sort of been set by the Darkest Dungeon, where each mission in the Darkest Dungeon is a gimmick, but it is its own gimmick, you know? I thought that level of creativity would be evident again in the courtyard, and it extremely was not. I know you guys didn't get to see all of it, but the Viscount's courtyard and the Countess's courtyard were exactly the same thing as the Baron's, just really, really long, a lot of branches, a key squirreled away somewhere in a side path that you have to search for, and then you take the key to the first door, and then there's another door, and it. I don't think it was that great of a gimmick the first time, and I was really surprised and displeased to see them do it 2 more times. And then I also don't think that any of the new boss fights are any good. I guess I can't really say that about the Viscount, because I have no idea what the Viscount, what his mechanics are. He just sort of rolled over and died. But like a lot of that was luck, right? I dodged several times in a row right at the beginning of the fight. I got some good crits. And I don't know. The way they tried to pump up the difficulty of all of the new bosses, the Fanatic included, by just giving them a ton of turns, I think I see what they were going for. If you make a boss who hits for 60 damage once per round, then that's a pretty high variance thing, right? Sometimes he's not going to hit. Sometimes he's going to hit for 60. Sometimes he's going to crit and hit for 120. And the range of things that can happen is extremely large. But if you want to keep that damage output, an average damage of 60 damage per round, you get a much better distribution of variance, so to say a much more even distribution of variance, by making a boss that hits 3 times for 20 damage each, right? And then a single dodge or a single crit doesn't influence the outcome by nearly as much. The problem, the core issue, I think, is that adding more turns to an enemy actually makes it considerably more dangerous. It doesn't just change the distribution. Every time you get crit, it adds a large amount of stress to the party. And so an enemy that attacks more times or attacks more targets has larger chance of dealing out stress. So while they may have distributed the damage more evenly over his multiple attacks, you can, if you hit a string of bad luck, even a string of bad luck that is not as bad as, say, taking the crit each turn from the 60 damage boss. Your stress levels shoot through the roof, your characters become unresponsive, and I don't think there's anything in this game that feels worse than your character electing not to do the thing you want them to do in a critical moment. And I don't mean anything in this game that is more of a negative outcome, because I know it's easy to conflate those two things. The thing I want didn't happen and I have a bad feeling about it is, like, I think a thing that's fine in general. I think it's okay for there to be bad outcomes. I think it's okay to make the player upset or angry or frustrated, but there are certain versions of it that suck a lot. So basically, there's certain versions of it that aren't okay. And I think a character just deciding he doesn't want to listen to you anymore at a crucial moment is one of those things that is not okay. Because it doesn't feel like you're losing in a way that you had any control over. It's very frustrating. I do want to say, I probably should have said this at the top, I don't regard anything I'm saying here as irrefutable fact, and if you disagree with me, you want to, have a discussion about it down in the comments below, please feel free. I would love to have a chat. So I do think that what we experienced through the end of the normal game was good, with the exception of, I don't think that the Fnatic fight that we did was, I just don't think the Fnatic's well designed. Because I don't think he conveys, well, hold on, we'll come back. The end of that sentence was, and I don't think the Baron's a great fight, but I do think the Baron's the best of the new bosses in that his mechanics are at least interesting. The thing where the eggs lock out healing and then you have to explore that mechanic and figure out exactly what its rules are. Like, that was not my favorite fight in the game, but it was at least an interesting idea expressed in an interesting way. I was down with that. I really like the music and just the sounds of being in the town. I knew I wanted this to be the background of this video because I honestly, sometimes when I'm about to record Darkest Dungeon, I just sit with this screen open for 20, 30 minutes beforehand, while I'm doing other stuff, just because it's so good. And I guess, yeah, this is a good time to talk about the game as a whole. I still think Darkest Dungeon's great. Like, it punches you in the face sometimes, and I think that that's okay and even valuable. As you can tell from a lot of the games I play, your XComs and whatnot, I don't mind a game where occasionally variance just puts the boot to you. It's fine. I play Blood Bowl a lot too. It's a great example of a game where variance can really, really put you down. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal as long as sort of the aggregate experience is good enough. The expected value of an action has to be relatively controllable. Individual instances of the action do not, basically. So I think that basically dice roll mechanics are fine. You have to be a little careful with them. So I still think Darkest Dungeon as a whole is good, but if you asked me, if you were about to play Darkest Dungeon, you were like, hey, SB, should I pick up Crimson Court? I would say no at this point. I don't know if they plan to... They probably don't plan to rebalance the bosses or anything. I think they probably produced the thing they want to produce. Red Hook seems to be a pretty intelligent, capable group of developers, so probably the thing they made is the thing they meant to make. But I would love to... I mentioned this in one of the videos. I would love to have a discussion with the guy who designed the red tier boss fights, the Viscount and the Countess, and ask what the intent was. Are you more or less intended to do the thing I did, and only do the courtyard as much as you absolutely have to get through the game? Because it seems like a pretty solid flow if you do it that way, right? I think that our campaign was a pretty good experience up to the part where I forced myself into the blender. But then you don't see most of the content of the expansion. I have to imagine that that's not what they wanted. But maybe it's maybe it is intended to just be like a little extra challenge thing. And the Garden Guardian, I think, is probably not something you're supposed to do a bunch before you finish the game. Boy, I don't like that fight either. I just don't. That fight's at least, it's bad in a different way than the other fights from the expansion. Because the thing that's wrong with the Garden Guardian is that he has a really easy to counter gimmick, and the way it actually ends up working is it really, like, the first fight we had really felt like a gotcha, like, ah ha ha, stupid, you didn't know the mechanics and now you die. But it wasn't like, I liked having to figure out how the Baron worked. I liked having to figure out how all the bosses worked the first time I came through. But with the Garden Guardian, it felt a little bit like once the thing you do that makes you figure out how the fight works, which is to say killing both of the weapons, also makes you lose the fight. And it's not a thing where you can like realize what's going on and recover. Once you've destroyed the weapons, you are out. I don't know. If he's low enough, I'm sure you can make the sprint to the finish. That would probably be like a pretty fun experience, I guess. But the fact that he's so easily controllable, like that you can just completely avoid making him threatening in any way, feels a little dumb. Like the second time we did it, we were in no danger at any point. And that doesn't seem to be within sort of the it's not within the same threshold of balance as the rest of the stuff in the game. It makes me feel like maybe they didn't test that one a lot. Like, I'm sure at some point during playtesting, some player figured that out, and the designers were like, well, I don't have time or the interest to redesign it. I don't know. Seems strange to me, but I guess it is what it is. So, yeah, I don't think I like the expansion. It's a bummer, because I think the base game is fantastic, and I would not necessarily be averse to playing it again, but I don't think I will probably ever play with the Crimson Courtyard content turned on again. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what you can turn on and off. I think the Flagellant's pretty cool. It would be a shame to lose the Flagellant class. Flagellants do some neat stuff. Although, I have to say, like, even the design of the Flagellant is a little up and down, because while I think the Flagellant as a whole is a neat idea, I think a number of his abilities are not very good. Like, this Reclaim is, I think, kind of a weird thing, and it's not... I think your initial instinct is to go, ooh, it damages him for more than it heals somebody for, that's not that good. But that's not even the problem I have with it. The problem I have is healing that goes on to somebody later feels pretty bad. And I don't know exactly how this works. If you have this plus a bleed on a person who's at death's door, does the heal trigger before the bleed? I should hope so, because otherwise this has like actually no use. But if the heal triggers before any damage over time effects, then it repeatedly bringing people off death's door is okay, I guess. Although repeatedly death's dooring them after the heal over time tick does mean that you're going to be distributing an awful lot of stress to your party. So maybe that isn't any good either. And then I do think the design of the trinket sets is pretty weird. Here, let's we have a couple of actual sets, right? Boy, when you sort these, they don't go together, huh? That's a little strange. So like this gives damage and crit versus blighted enemies. This gives an increased chance to lay down blight and debuff skill. Yeah, I like this is a fine set, I think. Obviously, you wouldn't be putting plus 50% damage on anybody else's gear, because everybody else has attacks that do a real amount of damage in the first place. But, like, some of them are really strange. Like, yeah, this, for example. Plus damage on melee and plus crit on melee, and then also plus debuff and stun chance as the set bonus. The Vestal doesn't have any melee attacks that can be used from the same position in the party as her stun attacks. So, like, this is really only good if you put it in a party, like, she has to be in a party with a Jester and a Grave Robber or something where people are constantly dancing around her. Otherwise, you can't even get all the effects of the item. It's just a very... I guess the idea was to encourage unusual party compositions, so I suppose in that way it succeeds, but I think what actually is going on here is that for the most part you just won't use these. Sharpened letter opener is good. The absinthe is a lot less so. And then a set bonus of plus 3% crit is, I mean, it's not bad, but it's definitely not good enough to make me want to equip the Absinthe. This is another problem here. Bonuses against Marked and Blighted and Bleeding and stuff. They're all really cool in theory, good ways to give you inter-party synergy, which is something I really value in a turn-based tactical strategy game. But because the gimmick of the whole expansion was that difficult enemies get 3 turns every round, they run out bleeds and blights and marks incredibly quickly. And it's less of a problem with bleeds and blights if it's right for you to just reapply them on every attack anyway, which it may be. But, like, there's no... You can't use marks on the Countess, right? Like, she's gonna run that stuff out sometimes before you'll place the mark on her, and then it will be off before anyone else in the party gets a turn. So, I cannot say enough how much I think the 3 turns per round thing misses the mark. Like, it's a good way of making the enemy more difficult, but that's really all it does. It makes the enemy more difficult because your effects make less sense. You're less good at recovering people from death's door, and of course you take a ton more stress over the course of the fight. Yeah, alright, I guess that's it. I don't really have a lot else to say. I was not expecting to talk for this long in the first place. So I hope that this has been interesting or valuable to some of you. Please, if you have thoughts on the game or on any of the things that I've just said or just on my campaign as a whole on this Let's Play series, I would love it if you would leave them in the comments below. I'll be very interested to hear people's feedback. And I guess that is going to be it for us for today and for this series. Maybe for Darkest Dungeon, I don't know. There's something else coming out. They teased a new hero, if you haven't seen it yet. At darkestdungeon.com, or I think that's their website. They teased a new hero, so clearly they have more plans. Something else is coming. I would love to have another expansion to this game that I can get behind, that I can feel a little better about. That would be great. But yeah, that's it for us, for here, for us, for now, for this, whatever. Listen, you know what I'm saying. The point is, we'll see you next time in some other thing.